In the end, didn't you win a Grammy for that music video?
We did. We had quite a few of them. It got stolen. But yes.
Your Grammy got stolen?
Well, what happened was I used to put it in my home when it came, and I had a very small flat. I used it as a door stopper. And then one day somebody came in and they stole the things around it. And
it's a weird time to have you here because how many hours away are you from the premiere of this film?
4 or 5, I don't know. The time's all gotten mushed up in my head. I think it's in about 5. No, you're right. In about 3 hours, yes.
Is this the world premiere?
It is.
This will be the first time you've sat in...
A first time anybody would have seen it apart from the one person who's seen it before. The producers saw it for the first time a couple of days ago. I showed it to them in LA.
How are you feeling about watching this film with an audience?
Wonderful.
Really?
I mean, you couldn't have a better mixture of it. I mean, the event is half Canadian, or not in the film as much because there's less Canada in it, but it's Canadian, Indo, and India. So I just think seeing it out here, hopefully there's a lot of stuff that might not be as clear to the white people, but with enough brown people in the room, I'm thinking a lot of stuff is a bit subtle. So maybe it'll give you a heads up on what's actually happening.
Let me remind people about the true story behind the events in case they don't recall it. Dear Jassi is based on the real-life story of a young woman who was brutally killed at just 25 for having a relationship with somebody that her family didn't approve of. Her mother and uncle had been charged with her murder. It was a big story everywhere. As you mentioned, it was especially a big story here in Canada. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to tell this story.
When the event happened about 23 years ago, I guess now, when it happened, I was somewhere and I saw this. And there was a line that I heard, which was because, when they call, unfortunately, it's such a common event that it's become a cliche, the whole thing about honor killings, not that it should ever be looked at like that. That when this event happened, it was a line that her mother said to the people who had kidnapped her. And I was very obsessed with that telephone call on how would have that telephone call work. Somebody has your daughter, and this is the line you say.
Elaborate on that a bit for people who don't know that part of
the line
story.
that she said basically was, she means nothing to us, do whatever you want. And I just thought it was a much more nuanced line than everybody would understand. First of all, you're getting this from the people who were caught, who actually did the murder. And did she say that? Did she not? That's one thing. Second, if she said it, I don't think it was said as you would perceive it on paper, which is like, blah, 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 do whatever you want. I said, I would put my mother in that situation, in such a horrendous situation, and I know how she'd say it. And it would be, because I had gone through Canada before I went to America. So at that time, I was kind of familiar, and the whole event happened in Punjab, very close to where I grew up. So I figured it would be somebody who's hurting you as they're hurting themselves. They're screaming, shouting, hitting themselves and doing really evil stuff in the name of what they think is the greater good. So that line would be like, you mean nothing to us, do whatever you want. I say, it's like that. It's not the other way. Not that I'm justifying what she did, but I wanted to understand where this woman is coming from. So I back-engineered the whole movie to say, if this was the ending, how was it that it came about that a mother could say that when somebody's threatening your daughter's life? And I realized that 95% of the story is a love story. And it's kind of like Romeo and Juliet, that it's basically a love story and then a misunderstanding in that particular one from the letter, and this particular one, a deliberate event basically stops anything from happening.
And a tremendous tragedy at the end of it, not unlike Romeo and Juliet.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the love portion of it in just a second, but I do want to talk a little bit about the way that you narratively structure this film. There's a tradition in a lot of cultures, including in like English cultures, Northern English cultures.
You mean the storyteller?
Have a bard off the top, a
I love
storyteller.
that you use that word. That's exactly how I always introduce him. That came to me much later. So about 23 years ago when the event happened, I'd called my brother and I said, this is a story I would like to make. We do it right now, or we wait for 20 years when it becomes retro. So then a small film, a personal film, I was looking for a little girl and I found the little girl and it was called The Fall. I did it and I brought it actually here to Toronto. The only other time I've ever been to a festival. So I came here with The Fall. So then I put that in the back of my head. And now when I was thinking I might like to do some movie in India, but I thought before I do any commercial stuff, I would like to do this personal one, just like what I did with The Fall before I did any Hollywood things. So it came back from there. They're just trying to figure out that if I'm going to do this, how do I tell the story? The thing is, the event happened 20 years ago. So when it finished, 23 years ago, when it finished, That's what I thought the story was. And then when you actually do the research, it turned a lot more horrendous.
Can you help me understand that better? You thought the end of
The end is that
this
they
young
killed the
woman,
girl, finished.
They killed the girl, finished.
It didn't. If you Google it, the guy went to jail for president 5 years.
Her husband.
Her husband went to jail for 5 years because somebody accused him of rape. Then after 5 years, that girl said, well, the relatives from Canada paid me to say this. He didn't. So it was just got a lot more traumatic. But I didn't know how to tell that story. It wouldn't go. So I kept thinking, how do I, and then the writer, when I pitched the story and the structure to him, wrote this, but it was about 40 minutes longer. And I just said, I'm going to take out the front, and I'm going to basically, when they first met is when the story starts, and I'm going to take out the end. He said, but you leave people in limbo. And I didn't want it to end in in the back end like a Harvey Weinstein film where you just show photos of the real people and all. I didn't want to do that. And I started thinking, I said, give me time. And then I remember it was 7 years ago, I'd seen this performer in a fair on YouTube, and he sang this, like, just a street performer guy singing the song. And he was like a Sufi, just a mystic. And I just said, what I'd like to embrace is basically how the bards, or how you see it in Pakistan, you see it in India and all that, where the street guy comes and sings to you. He might tell you a story. It's always a familiar story. So he'll tell you the story of their version of, like Romeo and Juliet, which is Heer Ranja or whatever. So common fables. But they'll sing it to you, and depending on your mood and the crowd, they adjust it for you. I just said, that's who's going to do it. So there's going to be bookends. I'll tell the beginning before by him, and the ending, he can finish the story. So then he came to mind, and that's how I found him.
There's a tradition of bards kind of setting up stories, and you said, this is such a complicated story to tell, and there's so much more to it than the part we are going to be able to tell. I'm going to use this kind of traditional narrative structure, or this narrative device, I should say, in order to be able to tell it.
Exactly right. That I use that as my bookends, that the bard would come in and just say, like, hey, if you want any more information, go this thing in, and then he introduces and closes the film for you.
You just described the film as a personal film to you. Why?
I would just say that this is about the time when I'd gone through Canada, and the story happened right near my place in Punjab. I did not shoot it exactly where it happened, just because in the last 23 years, that area has gotten so built up that I went another 200 kilometers away, closer to the Pakistani border, where not too many things have built up to make it feel familiar. But I could, for lack of a better word, smell the cow dung. I knew what the whole taste of everything was, exactly how it was going to be. So I just said, like, it's very familiar to me. So I'd like to make this story because the two worlds I know well enough. Not that much in Canada because I was in LA, but I did come to visit relatives and all that in Vancouver. So I knew what that would look like. So then it became a personal story, because I just thought the idea of a joint family, the idea that everybody can say this is wrong, which is quite easily wrong, but how do you tell the story from the mother's, it is not the mother's perspective, but how do you say that this person exists and their rules are completely different? So I just thought, my mom, who I think didn't have an evil bone in her body, could do so much harm just from the culture and the traditions she comes from. I said, I'm familiar with those. So let me take that mother, of this girl's mother, and put my mother in that particular position and see how it plays out. And then it started to come together really well. So I put my mom in the villain's position, and somehow it felt I could relate with it.
You put your mother in the villain's position.
My mother's character. My mother passed away long ago. But I just thought, like, this girl's mother, like, when you have a joint family and you do what they call honor killings or anything, their whole thing on this particular one is that they literally are cutting their losses. If you have 10 girls living in the house, if one of them marries a white guy, a guy below their station from a different caste or anything like that, the other 9 will not marry in their station, might never get married. So anything. So you're literally looking at just thinking, because of one, all those are going away. How do I cut my losses? You just say, okay, gone. You're out of my life. And then you concentrate on the other 9. That doesn't exist if you have your home and the only thing that you have is your daughter. So this is a joint family home. It is almost, you can call it a cult, you can do whatever you want. But they had, when I went and saw the real place, they had 27 rooms on top. So it was like the mom, her brother, her uncle, her blah, blah, her blah, blah, everybody lived there with their children. So this is one person that you have that has now done something that might stain everybody and might compromise everybody's position. So that's why the event occurred how it did.
It sounds like you're trying to find, and I don't know the right word, what was going through my mind was compassion or justification. I don't think it's either of those things.
I'd agree with you. I would say understanding, but not compassion or this thing or agreeing with.
No.
It is horrible and it's wrong.
But you wanted to understand it.
I wanted to understand. I wanted the people who are not in that situation to understand it. That if you have not lived in a joint family and everything, you are not the be all and end. There's usually one person that will become the alpha male. And in this particular case, it was her husband. Then he kind of was handicapped, died, and her brother becomes this. And when he becomes this, just to basically become more, more in control, he overstepped his bound and did what he did. So it's just, and also it's a word that I hate, especially
you hate
Indians.
the term honor killing?
I do, because I think I think the West does this really well. When they take something like that and I think the word is spin, or you just use the nomenclature to make it feel more correct to the situation. You'll call it smart bomb or collateral damage if if a bomb drops near a school or whatever. Whereas to call honor killing is literally saying like, oh, we can understand where that's coming from. It's not. I think that should be re-owned, that word, and just come up with a different word and hopefully include murder in it. It isn't anything honorable about killing a child that basically has decided not to live in your household.
I watched, I think, 2 different sort of documentary specials about this case before when I was getting ready to watch your film.
Mm-hmm. I watched them. Yeah. I watched the documentaries, nothing else on it.
Why tell this story through, I don't want to say fictional because it's not fictional, but like in a narrative way, as opposed to a documentary? Because
the problem is, Grierson, the original documentary filmmaker's definition of documentary was a creative treatment of reality. And I'm thinking like, really? Can you define reality for me? So it isn't. So when you say documentary, that doesn't make anything real. It doesn't say it's any more real than if somebody tells an fictitious. Can you tell a person's, 20, 25-year story in like 30 minutes? That's already fictional. What you decide to put and what you don't is what happens. The only thing that can play out correctly is if you just watch a CCTV footage of something. Okay, that's how the event happened. But you'll need history. You'll need the setup and everything of it. The documentaries tell it in a different sense, and this tells it in a different sense. The documentaries also now half the time is reenactment. It's all thing, and it's okay. I'm not judging those at all. I went to school to do documentaries, had a horrible documentary teacher and decided didn't want to have nothing to do with documentaries. Ended up in a much more of a visual medium. So for me, when I had to tell the story, I think documentaries is one way of telling people a story. And then I wouldn't say fictionalized, I would just say reinterpreting it and actually playing it with actors is another way.
Is that a way? Are you able to get at a different emotional? I know this is a bit leading, but are you 100%. Able to get at a greater emotional truth that way?
I think true, very much so. And at the same time, this film is quite cold. You can't, there is no music. Not only no music, there is no background music. There's no nothing. So when I told that to the writer, I said, if you kind of imagine that Michael Haneke made a movie and an Iranian like Shirin Nishat directed it, that's what this has to be.
Why didn't you want any music in the background?
Because I just thought, the writer's answer was like, if you put music in the background, how will people know that you're supposed to be sad and it's threatening? I said, it's called acting. So I just said, you don't need it. You watch a Michael Haneke film, it's 20 million times more disturbing to me than something that's got on the strings telling you when to feel sad and when not to. So I'd already decided to shoot it like that. And so when I told it to the cast, when we did it and I had everybody sit down in one room, somebody said, oh, you're not making a Punjabi movie. You're making a movie in Punjabi. And I just said, that's the best compliment I could have gotten. I said, yes. So basically, if nothing is working in the medium and master shots, we're kind of dead in the water because there is no close-ups in the movie. It is very mise-en-scène. Yeah, it's just shot to have things happen in front of you. And I thought if it doesn't play out, there is no coverage. The only close-up in the movie is of a character never appears again. So I just thought it was a very small little thing. I didn't want it to be about dictating, things with editing. It just happened very flat.
Did you reach out to, I should say, the people involved in this are still around.
Yes.
Did you reach out to anybody? Did you hear from anybody?
When we went out there, we had to decide, should we reach out to one side and get their permission or go with a journalist? So we actually decided it's better to get a book and get the rights to that, and we made it through that. We bought a book by a writer from Canada, and we based it on that and went around. All the information was contained in that. The problem was that if we went after the family, I think maybe somebody already had spoken to him. They've been talking about making these things forever. Nobody's done anything about it.
And I just said, someone had spoken to the husband. Someone had spoken to.
We didn't.
Oh yeah.
We didn't. But I know that some other people have.
Yeah.
And a lot of people since that time he's evolved and become a completely different guy. They blame him for a lot of other things that I think half of them are set up. I didn't want to investigate that. I just said I want to tell the story that I saw 23 years ago, and then just say, hey, after this, go look at the internet, watch the documentaries, watch whatever you want to see, where the story went to, and make your own mind up.
You say that in the film at the end. I don't think this is a spoiler. At the end of the film, the bard says, go look this up on the internet and see where it went.
True. And you know, the funny thing is, I wished I'd subtitled that better because all the Indians got what he was saying. And a couple of friends of mine, including, Finch, were saying, like, I think he comes out quite blasé because and the problem was I had the subtitles wrong. It kind of said like a really horrific event, and then a guy comes on and goes like, hey, check this out on the internet. I said, no, he's actually saying, then I realized it had to say, do the research. So when I changed the words, all that changed. But that's exactly what he says. If you really think, and the irony of it is that when you look at something like this, whatever you think is made up in the story is how it happened. It's like literally when I sent it to a friend of mine, he said, this is Romeo and Juliet. So you made up that thing about I said, no. And then I realized, he said, what about the drugging? That they used to drug their family so they could meet each other. And he said, like, in Romeo and Juliet, they get their drugs mixed up is how, the whole tragedy happens. I said, no, that's exactly what happened. They went out there and they put horse tranquilizers in the guy's this thing so that he could come in. There was no place they could meet. So literally
he drugged the family so that he could see his wife.
He gave her something so that she would put it in the drink so they would sleep more soundly, so they could just meet in the evening. So I just realized, there was so much more from Romeo and Juliet, and it's not made up. So I just said, in the end, just Google it, take a look at the research, and you realize actually the events are exactly how I think it happened, and I know the places, and I think this is how it would have gone down.
Did you feel any added responsibility, given that these are real people and some of whom are still around?
I think I wouldn't say responsibility. I just wanted to be as true to everybody as I could be. Means like that's why I think I wouldn't take the mother's side, but I could understand how my mother could do something as horrific as this. And I put like a little bit of leaning towards that particular side, but I just did not want it to be. See, there was a lot of stuff that the Indians might get. And actually, the actress playing the part, the mother, said that to me that, I would do that. And I would do that. And I would just think like, it's really horrific. But I could understand that she was being able to relate with certain things. So I knew I was on the right track. And one of the things was that basically, the things in India you don't do. You don't go out with a girl from your village. It's like, in all cultures, everybody abhors incest. So what you try to do is you don't go out, you don't marry the person from your village. It's always a village removed. Your last name and your mother's last name cannot match that person's last name and that person's mother's last name. So all these things are kind of like, given rules so that you don't end up having incest, you go somewhere else. She went back, she picked a guy from her village. That was already kind of a no-no. And everybody was saying that, so this guy was below her station. I said, that is true, but not the basic thing. Like he was below the station is why they would have said no to him for a proposal. But the truth is, he had the last name as her. And which is something only when I did the research, I found out. I said, my mom would have freaked out and said like, wait a minute, that's your brother or anything like that. So there was a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't put in the movie. So I just said, okay, if I'm not addressing that, I've put in the lines in there. So the Indians might catch it when the guy says like, hey, how come you've got a job? Why aren't you two together? And he goes like, it's my last name. So it's just like they had the same last name. And when she says when you check into the honeymoon suite, she said like Mr. Sidhu and Mrs. Sidhu. She's always been Sidhu. And so that kind of hints I kind of left in there. And I just said, you do the research and you realize it was quite an evil, horrible thing that happened. Just, I think both the sides, I wanted to tell their story without actually glamorizing any of it.
This is your first film in India, is that right?
That's right, and in Punjabi, which is my mother tongue.
So this is your first film in 8 years? And your
in 8 years, yes.
And your first film in...
7 years, yes.
How was the experience of making a film in India?
It's phenomenal now. India is phenomenal. Because the last time I shot there, when I first started shooting there about 25 years ago, it was horrendous. Because anyway, you'd go with a white crew and I'd be shooting advertising and everybody would just come to me and say, where shall I park the trucks? Where do you want to eat? And I said, I'm the director. He said, but the other guy's white. I'd rather ask. And I was thinking like, talk to the other guy, just park it. So all the problems would be mine. But now when I went out there, everybody has understood the hierarchy. The crews that I had were phenomenal. They moved incredibly fast.
Oh, that was the issue. People didn't think that you were worth listening to.
I would be in charge.
Yeah.
They just say, but he's white, so you tell me what to do.
Yeah. Right. And
that's gone.
How was it this time?
Phenomenal. It's just everybody went in. It was set up what a director does. Everybody understood what it was. It was an Indian crew. I took Irish DP just because the last second I just wanted to make sure that there was a shortcut on how I worked with him, and I wanted to move at a particular speed. So I took my DP with me.
Was it in India that
director of photography, sorry.
Thank you. Was it in India that you decided you wanted to be a filmmaker in the first place?
Yes. From very early, I would just say I didn't realize I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I was always wanting to tell stories.
Tell me about that.
I went to school in Bishop Cotton School. all my friends will tell you that in the Himalayas, what we used to have every Saturday we used to have a movie. But on Saturday in the afternoon, we would tell stories, and I was always the guy who would jump up front to go and tell stories. Got them very wrong because I was growing up. My father was posted in Iran, so I was the only guy that had access to TV at that particular time. This would be like late 60s. So I was watching TV and going to India, but it was spoken in a language that I did not understand. It was in Farsi.
In Farsi, yeah.
So when I would go back to India, I would tell these stories, and I would make them. Years later, my friends would come and say like, "But that was never anything like." Because I remember seeing Get Smart, and I would tell this story about this really cool detective guy who had his, telephone in his shoe, and for the West that was so over the top.
Yeah.
But if you've grown up on Hindi movies where a dog can have a flashback in the middle of a really serious situation, there was nothing like over the top about it. So I would tell them about all these stories that I think I saw that over the time it just became that I was the storyteller. So when the fall came out of that when I did the fall, it was about storytelling and the manipulation involved in watching the body language of the person in front of you to change the story to the guy.
But I first know you as a music video director.
Yes.
In fact, you're the second music video director in here today who has a feature at TIFF.
Wonderful.
Jonathan Glazer was here earlier.
Oh my God, I love him.
Who did Street Spirit. Radiohead.
I don't know about his music videos, but he's made the greatest films I have ever seen.
But did you know he did music videos too?
I do. We did commercials together.
He did. Did you guys work together?
No. I knew we were doing, because he's done some Guinness commercials. I've done Guinness commercials. So we were in Europe doing advertising at the same time. I have never met him. If he's here, I would love to.
He's in Toronto right now. He was here like 3 hours ago.
I will reach out and get in touch with him. Because for me, there is something that I love and why I'm so like anti something like when people just look at Tomato Meter, Way to Go. One of my favorite films of his is Birth. And the problem is when films are polarizing, what you end up with, you'll find people in 50% on Rotten Tomatoes,
Rotten Tomatoes.
And it's a
like
masterpiece because there's people who love it. And for the fall, it's people think it's the best things in sliced bread or an absolute turd. And I'm okay with both. It's the Comsi Comsa that I'm scared of. And Comsi Comsa end up in the 90s.
Right.
So for me, I just loved when I see him on Birth that it's so polarizing that he did that I can so relate with him.
You feel like the thing you have in common is you both made films that people either love or hate. And that's a sign of a good film as opposed to something
for me. For me, obviously not for critics.
I mean, he made Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai, one of the biggest music videos of all time. But so did you. You made Losing My Religion by R.E.M, one of the most, I
was in college. It was the first thing I did.
Can you tell me about making that thing? I'd love to hear it. I love that video.
Well, I told you, I wanted to go to documentaries. We had a really bad documentary teacher, and I just started thinking, okay, and I didn't realize that my visual background was different from everybody else's. Of course, I only discovered that when I was in film school. That
your visual background was different
because
than
I grew up
else.
in Iran. Told stories in India. So I grew up on Bollywood films and Farsi and did not speak Farsi, but saw all that TV. And then we used to go and see my cousins in England. So it's kind of, when you're digging from the same well, water, it always tastes the same. So people always, when they ask me, like, how do you make your stuff look different? I go like, you've got to have had a different experience in life unless you just want to ape somebody. So you just go and see, and the well that you'll pull from will end up with all of these. Somebody came to give a lecture in our school. And one of them was actually, and they gave a lecture on music videos. And I just went like, okay, that's the best ticket in for anybody who wants to do anything visual, because right now it's like because anybody who has a telephone can be a director. So for me, the problem was, how do I make anything? And I thought, if I have a visual background, I'll try music videos. And then I did one little video, and the R.E.M guys saw that. And the people approached me to say, like, okay, they'll do this. So I just thought, okay, the thing is, and which is why it took me 28 years to do another music video, which was the Lady Gaga one 2 years ago, was that I don't want to write. I mean, it's such a visceral experience. And for all writers and for all music video guys, like, from Spike to Fincher, they're brilliant. What they do is they have a team, they listen to your song, they write an idea to your song. I'm horrible for music videos. I'm the other way around. I have an idea, and if your song fits it, I'm like, great. So that's not going to happen often. So what happened with R.E.M. was they sent me the song, and I kind of went like, oh, I have an idea for it.
What was the idea you had?
Well, I didn't want to write it. So I just said, I'm not going to, but can I go see them? They said, yeah, sure. They're in Atlanta. In Athens. And I went, fantastic. So I hadn't seen my family in England for so long. I said, I'm coming to Europe. I'll go and see them. I arrive at the airport, and it's Athens, Georgia. So I go like, oh. So I go to see him. I hang out with him for 3 days. And he thought I'm procrastinating to not tell him the idea. I wasn't going to pitch it. I went, one day we went clubbing and I saw him dance, and I said that was the missing element. He had such a great body language piece that I wanted. Then when he was going, he just said, aren't you going to tell me the idea? I said, no, I'm going to figure it out. But I think it's Very Old Man with Wings, it's a story from Gabriel Garcia Marquez, meets these Russian propaganda posters, and there's these guys called Pierre and Gilles that do these really Western gods, very gay and kitsch. There's these two French guys, and I just said, like the Indians' gods look that kitsch. So I said, it'll be interesting to have in India copy these French guys copying Indians. And just said, I'm going to put those together and make a video out of it. And I said, that's all I can tell you. And he goes, oh, okay, because until that particular point, they were in a very strange situation from what I understand, because they had really pulled down anybody lip syncing. They were a college band. They were saying, this is horrible. Why are people screw MTV, blah, blah, blah. And then Michael Stipe saw the Sinead O'Connor video. And he said, okay, it's a different thing. Yeah, everything compares. He said, it's a different thing. If you're going to go, we're going to embrace it. So they just said, okay, you do what you want, because the real fan base are going to tell us that you sold out anyway. So I just said, okay, great. So I went out there and I just did my thing. And then in the end, when it turns out, it was just like, they just exploded.
In the end, didn't you win a Grammy for that music video?
We did. We had quite a few of them. It got stolen. But yes.
Your Grammy got stolen?
Well, what happened was I used to put it in my home when it came, and I had a very small flat. I used it as a door stopper. And then one day somebody came in and they stole the things around it and sitting right by the door. And then they took it. I had the MTV Awards too, which nobody that time, MTV wasn't big enough. They didn't realize what it was, but they knew what a Grammy was. So they stole it. So I'm thinking maybe I'll ask Grammy guys to give me another one.
I think they'll do it. I think they'll do it for you.
Okay.
What makes you go back to it? A lot of music video directors start in music videos and then go on to make feature films, and then that's it forever. But you, like you mentioned, you made the Lady Gaga video not that long ago.
I love music videos, but unfortunately, they take so much out of me. And also that there's a lot of artists that I like, and when I talk to them, I just tell them, no, it's your song. It's like somebody else's baby, and I'm telling them how it should behave. It's not the right way how I make music videos. So it's only very rarely that I'll tell you a story and it fits your song and you agree it fits your song. So when they asked me of the Gaga thing, I did not write a word. I just said, I'll talk to her and I'll tell her what it's about. Of course, there's about 18 other people that I got on the call. Fortunately, that is such a powerful snakehead. She just goes everybody else off. I tell her the story. She starts crying. She says, that's the thing I want. I said, great, because I had that same idea for the song Angel by Massive Attack, and I pitched it to them. And unfortunately for them, I couldn't get the time. That time I was so busy doing commercials. I couldn't make the schedule work. And it went away. And then suddenly when the Gaga came thinking, I said, there's another song you have on your album. I need the strings of that to tell the story. She said, take what you want. And when I presented her the cut, she did not change a single frame. So I said, that's very rare that I'll get something.
She's an artist, right? She's
phenomenal.
Yeah,
she just said,
yeah.
take it. And it's not fair when it's your song and a brown guy comes and tells you how the visuals should be.
Right.
But she let it go.
Before we go, and I'm getting the rap that we're running out of time, but I don't like the thumbs up, by the way. We're running out of time.
No,
great.
Whatever you want.
Actually, it's funny. I said this to Jonathan Glazer this morning.
I love him. I didn't know you said he's here. I'm going to go see him because his movie is a masterpiece. I'm going to try to see it here again.
There's similarities between the two. And
somebody just told me that, and I felt my heart broke that he got it out before there. But it's quite mise en scène as opposed to any coverage telling you story.
Exactly. It's a very quiet, very, very, very quiet film, and also based around true events.
Yes, and I loved Under the Skin.
But similarly, I try to avoid, I used to do this in the early days of doing this show. I used to be like, what's the message behind this film? But like, that's sort of a fool's game, right? It's sort of a fool's errand to ask that question. It implies that you're trying to be didactic. It implies but watching this film, I did wonder this. And I thought about how to put it to you, and I put it to you like this. Let's say two people are watching this film together, and they get back into the car after they've seen the film. Is there something you hope, in seriousness, is there something that you hope they're talking about after seeing it?
From the few people that I know who've seen it, they don't talk when they see this film. They've all just gone away and waited for a long time before they brought up the subject again. I think that's the best compliment I could get.
Why?
They just said there was a lot more to... My nephew used this expression, and I went like, wow, which is the ending? It was an 18-minute shot, which just needed to do something because the event is not graphic.
This is the killing.
And because it's not graphic, it is so horrific, the audio version of it, that when you come to the bard to give you the summary to go away, he said the reason he needed that to play out is you needed to decompress. It's not a movie you can applaud in the end. It's not a movie you get up and leave in the end and start discussing. And it's just something that you let it come over you for a while. And then hopefully later... go do some research on the story and please have a different opinion than mine. And just like, it's okay. Just don't go and don't subscribe to conspiracy theories, but just look at all that particular stuff. So I don't think the message is that clear cut. Obviously, it's horrible to kill your child. Okay, so that's it. You don't need to preach that to anybody unless they got a mental issue. So for me, it isn't that message oriented. It's just that this is how particular events played out. And all I can say is that if you see how they lived, the smell of the cow dung that the guy grew up in, blah blah. If you see all that particular way, it won't make sense, but you can see where it came from. Like, this is probably how it went. It was an expression, I forget his name. I think it was Paul Greengrass, when he said it was United 93 when they shot it. I'm not biggest fan of shooting things verite all the time, but I really loved that film. And his thing was to make it. He just said, like, they thought that of that event, and they thought, like, this is probably how it went down. So for me, I saw this, and I just said, I want to make a movie on this is how I think it went down. Please make up your own mind. I think it's quite one-dimensional, the obvious message. But please just see that there were a lot more things you can do to help something like this not happening again.
I really enjoyed watching the film. I really enjoyed talking to you about it. Thanks for making the time, man.
Thank you.